This week on Straight to the Point, a special investigation that reveals a stunning injustice against American service members that could go all the way to the Supreme Court. 6 years ago this month, Iran launched a ballistic missile attack against American forces in Iraq in retaliation for the assassination of a top Iranian general. No one was killed that day, but American service members suffered crippling traumatic brain injuries. And these military records obtained by our team suggest they were also exposed to toxic agents, including radiation. Our investigation began 18 months ago.
That was the largest ballistic missile attack on U.S. forces in the history of war. None of us really should have survived.
What makes that missile stand out?
The heat signature is much different than the rest of them.
Are these military records an acknowledgement that Iran's ballistic missile attack exposed U.S. service members to toxic agents?
100%.
And it describes radiation, heavy metals.
They absolutely are directly related to those ballistic missiles.
Is there new evidence service members are getting sick?
Yes.
You're monitoring what may be thyroid cancer yourself.
Correct.
We're going to have another Agent Orange situation. 10 years down the road, these service members are going to be out and they're going to be dying. And the court dismissed the case. They said a death had to occur.
Just to be clear, up until this administration, an attempted killing still opened the courthouse doors.
Correct.
So this is a change under the Biden-Harris administration.
It is a change that happened in the past 2 years.
These service members are still seeking accountability and taking a back seat to Iran. So let's get straight to the point. Have the last 6 years been a struggle?
Just physically, traumatic brain injury doesn't manifest itself equally across a population that's affected, right? I deal with some of those struggles every day, the dizziness and headaches and hypervigilance, from the mental health standpoint. But even more frustratingly, we're dealing with a slow-moving medical process through the VA to get appropriate care for my fellow warriors that were with me on that site.
It must be very heartbreaking.
It is.
To hear these stories, especially about very, very young soldiers.
Yes. Soldiers that are in their 20s and 30s, being homeless, having increased mental health needs that aren't being addressed, finding challenges in the VA system to be awarded a certain amount of their disability compensation benefits, and just the general medical screening that they deserve because of the nature of that attack.
Well, and the way the system is set up kind of lends to this onesies and twosies approach is what I'll call it. Because as part of the folks get out or they separate, they're now into the VA system. They're spread out all over the United States. You've got folks, other members of the cohort who maybe stayed in, who are now getting spread out to different bases and camps and stations where the level of care across the board varies. And so each time these individual members move around, they have to start over, completely new. And so what ends up happening is the holistic picture doesn't get painted. They just go in and they get their symptom of the day treated.
Sounds like a lot of these soldiers are falling through the cracks 6 years later.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's because the way the system is designed. It's not intentional. It's just the way the system works, unfortunately. There's ways to mitigate that, though.
As part of our investigation, we obtained these military records that suggest that Iran's ballistic missile attack exposed U.S. service members to toxic agents, including radiation.
Correct.
Is there evidence that soldiers are now getting sick?
Absolutely, there's evidence. I personally know of 2 soldiers that have had to have thyroidectomies. There are reports of up to 6 or more soldiers that have had thyroid cancer. I'm being screened myself.
So to be clear, you yourself are monitoring for cancer.
Correct.
Thyroid cancer.
Correct.
That you believe is directly connected to the radiation exposure.
Correct.
From Iran's ballistic missile attack.
But I have an advantage. I work in that field. my specialty is emergency medicine, but I am well connected in that, in the world of medicine. So it's easy for me to navigate that. For these other 20, 30-year-old kids, dead end. Every time they want this special screening, they reach a dead end, and it's difficult for them to negotiate that process.
We spoke with environmental specialists about these military testing records, and they told us that radioactive materials such as actinium-228, bismuth-214, cesium-137 seemed, in their words, out of place with a conventional missile. Do you believe that Iran used a dirty warhead against U.S. service members?
I think it's possible. We know that one of the warheads, one of the missiles was it was a different type of missile that was utilized. The explosion, the signature was completely different. We know that before the attack, there was no radiation present at al-Asad Air Base. The only conclusion that I can draw is that it rode in on a ballistic missile fired from Iran.
When we first spoke to you in October of 2024, you told us you thought this was shaping up. Is this shaping up to be another Agent Orange?
Absolutely. I think we're going to find as this entire cohort is going to start experiencing a lot of the same issues over time, and they need to be pulled together and monitored to make sure that we ensure that this doesn't happen in the future. We protect our force and make our force more resilient in the future, and that we take care of our service members now.
According to the lawsuit, other toxic agents were identified at the base, including potentially cancer-causing agents. Is the Department of War, the VA, are they screening service members who were attacked?
There is not, at this time, an organized surveillance program for those soldiers that were on the ground during that attack.
Why not?
That's a good question, Catherine. I have reached out to Congress. I've reached out to the VA. I've reached out to the War-Related Injuries Research Center. I have reached out through my chain of command previously while I was still wearing the uniform. And this is a very difficult path to navigate in order for something like this to happen.
Is that something that the Trump administration could do right now?
Absolutely. Congress could direct the administration to do it, but the administration can take action right now. And you're talking less than 100 service members that were affected by this. And it's an opportunity for the Department of War. The Department of War could study that group and come up with ways to mitigate the negative effects of blast exposure over time, while the VA can make sure that that group is getting cared for over time, and that as these symptoms and these injuries compound on themselves, that these service members are cared for.
What difference would it make to these service members?
It would mean that they're not being overlooked, that the government is staying true to the bond and the oath. It would mean that these service members matter.
The government needs to hold their end of the bargain on this. We were put in a situation that thankfully we survived, but now we've got all of these implications of health risks, whether it's risk of cancer, mental health, suicide, homelessness, that is occurring, and they're not being taken care of.
You have got a whole generation of warfighter who is living with traumatic brain injuries.
Right.
Correct.
And PTSD and operator syndrome, whatever the term of the day is. And we have the resources in place. They exist both within the Defense Health Agency as well as the Department of Veterans Affairs. But what has to happen, unfortunately, is there has to be top-down pressure to bring these groups together to address the problem.
Based on the court records, this young soldier, Jason Quidaqua, was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury as a result of Iran's attack on the base, also post-traumatic stress disorder. And in the lawsuit, you have a nationally recognized expert who says that Jason's suicide was caused by Iran's attack.
Correct.
The fact that the courts concluded that there was no death that day, the day of the attack. Therefore, you can't sue. Does that minimize Jason's life?
It absolutely does.
Were you shocked?
Very shocked, actually.
I think for the average person who looks at Jason Quiddiqua's story, a young guy, wants to serve his country, severely injured in an attack by Iran on his base. And based on the court brief, 21 months after the attack, he commits suicide. They're not going to understand why that death doesn't seem to count to the courts.
Especially when you have a doctor that says it was directly connected to his TBI and PTSD, that it's like, what the reason that people don't understand is because the court applied an unrealistic and the wrong standard to that proximate cause analysis. And so I think that's an opportunity for the appellate courts to clean that up and to reassert the law and reapply the law in a manner that is consistent with the congressional intent.
A lot of Americans are going to be confused because Iran's intent was to kill every American on the base. They could have hit the runway, right? But they didn't. They focused on the areas where they were conducting drone operations.
They were specifically targeting that particular unit because they believed that that unit was responsible for the death of Soleimani.
The Iranian general.
Correct. Al-Asad Air Base is a massive air base, and you're right. They could have put those warheads in on the runway and disabled the runway and put it out of commission for months. You know, you put 11 giant holes in a runway, it takes a while to fix that runway. They didn't do that. They specifically targeted the logistics buildings, the maintenance buildings, the living quarters, the dining facilities. All of that was along the line where those ballistic missiles went in on.
And this is why I think many Americans will be confused listening to this story, because Iran's intent was to kill every American on that base. But it was a miracle.
It was.
That no one died that day. But because of that miracle, the U.S. courthouse doors are closed.
Correct.
To these service members.
Now.
Right now. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. There's a way to fix this right now, though. Congress could step in and say, look, we understand that you missed it on our intent. Look, we're going to change the law and we're going to add a word here or there. Essentially, they're going to say, if you attempt to kill U.S. citizens, well, then immunity is waived and you can get into the court. That's an easy fix by Congress. It really clears this whole thing up for the courts and they can get back to business. We have a death. I think these kids should be put in front of the interests of Iran. And I think that the court should send it back and give us a win in this particular case.
Is this a relatively new position for the U.S. government, for the courts?
Yes. So when Congress established the terrorism exception, I don't know, almost 30 years ago, their intent was that we hold all of these nation states and state sponsors of terrorism accountable for their activities if they engage in terrorist attacks. And so for 30 years, even if there was no death in an attack, it was just injuries, federal courts allowed these cases to proceed. And it was only, 3 years ago that this other case came up through the system and has totally upended that precedent.
So this was a change first under the Biden administration.
Correct.
Has the Trump administration taken the same position?
The current case on appeal hasn't made it to a position where this administration, the Solicitor General, could comment on it. So if the case is dismissed, we will likely appeal it to the Supreme Court if there's grounds, and then this administration could weigh in.
What message has been sent to Iran? We have, based on my reporting, over 80 service members and contractors with traumatic brain injuries, 1 death, and I don't see where the accountability has been for Iran.
Yeah, there's no accountability. And the lesson learned for Iran is if you don't want to be hit in your pocketbook, Make sure that you structure your strike in a way that doesn't kill anybody, and then you won't get sued.
Doesn't kill anyone, but it cripples them for life.
Yep. But they they won't be able to hold you accountable.
And I hope that this interview and our discussion captures the interest of Secretary of VA Doug Collins, Sec War Hegseth, any of the leaders that can actually sort of guide the process to make the medical surveillance, mental health surveillance process a reality for the kids that especially were on the ground then, but now following that event, the soldiers that ended up wearing dosimetry watches on the same site.
This is a dosimeter. For a layperson, what is a dosimeter?
It's a device that measures radiation levels.
Based on your reporting, are dosimeters being issued to service members at al-Asad?
Yes, post-attack, any service member who is deployed to al-Asad Air Base is now being issued a dosimeter.
Does that suggest that there is an ongoing radiation risk?
Yes. Why else would you issue a device to monitor radiation levels if you weren't concerned about exposure to radiation?
Your information is that within the last year, dosimeters have been issued to service members.
Correct.
At the base.
That's correct.
Has the U.S. government ever publicly acknowledged the risk of these toxic agents?
Not to my knowledge.
Is that something that should be acknowledged by the U.S. government?
Well, it should be, because it points to a potential tactic that Iran is using. You know, they're launching contaminated warheads against their foes and their enemies. If that's the case, we need to be tracking that. We need to prevent that from happening.
Those warheads had the capability of carrying biological, high explosive, anti-personnel, and in this case, contaminated.
Al-Asad was the first true test of their theater ballistic missile system that was managed by the IRGC. I think that they wanted to test out as many capabilities, as many different types of warheads as they could in order to determine, okay, does it work? And what changes do we need to make in our tactics and techniques and procedures moving forward?
It was very intentional.
Yeah.
A warhead that had toxic agents, even radioactive elements.
And different generations of warheads as well. So they were clearly, testing their entire scope of their capability.
We're sitting down exactly 6 years to the month since the attack. What is next?
What's next from the legal perspective is we hope to get a ruling from the appellate courts this year. From the medical perspective, I'll leave that to you, but
we hope to develop a surveillance program for the initial population of warriors that were on that site during the attack, and subsequently to include the rest of the fighting force that was redeployed or deployed after the attack. If they're in a surveillance program, all of that is tracked and tracked very well.
The U.S. government may be missing another opportunity here, and then to help other service members who have come through the global war on terror and also living with severe traumatic brain injuries and toxic exposure, the combination of the two.
It's a missed opportunity, for sure.
I first reported on these service members when I was a senior investigative correspondent at CBS News in Washington, and we revealed that dozens were wrongly denied the Purple Heart for their traumatic brain injuries. As that wrong was being righted, I started receiving reports that some of these soldiers were getting sick with illnesses that they blamed on toxic exposure from Iran's ballistic missile attack. We asked the Department of War and Veterans Affairs to respond to our reporting about toxic exposure and the lack of formal screening. Here's their response. A War Department official said that during an upcoming meeting, the Undersecretary of War for Personnel and Readiness and Deputy Secretary of Veterans Affairs will discuss the impacts of ballistic missile strikes on the al-Asad cohort specifically and identify the best path forward for our impacted warfighters and veterans. Asked about the use of dosimeters that detect radiation, the official said the Department of War and the VA will determine whether there are ongoing health risks so that we can provide members with the care they need. The Department of War has nothing to provide at this time about the warheads used by Iran. This is an opportunity for the Trump administration to have the back of these service members. And this is the kind of accountability journalism you can expect here at Straight to the Point. We'll see you next time.